Hey everyone, welcome to the Guitar Speak podcast. My name's Matt Wakeling and this is the show that I produce in Sydney, Australia. Thank you so much for joining me for episode number 180. Now today I'm joined by the amazing Stuart Garrard, aka Stu G, from Delirious and Michael W. Smith. We had a great conversation. Spoke to Stu in his home studio in Nashville, and we'll get to that interview very soon. Today's episode is brought to you by Fretboard Biology, the comprehensive online guitar course put together by Joe Elliott. Now, Joe is not only a fantastic guitar player, he draws on his years of experience as the ex-head of guitar at the Guitar Institute of Technology and also at the McNally Smith Music College. Here's a few words from Joe about the course.
If you're tired of wading through hundreds of random guitar videos and just want to become a better player, Fretboard Biology is your answer. Fretboard Biology is a self-paced, college-level program that'll give you the right instruction, in the right amounts, and in the right order. You'll learn the same information I taught to thousands of other guitar players over 30 years of teaching in top music colleges. If you want to make real progress with your guitar playing, then sign up for a free 7-day trial at fretboardbiology.com.
My thanks to Joe and the entire Fretboard Biology team. They've been great sponsors of the show, so please check out their stuff. Alrighty. Now, if you've been listening to the podcast for a little while, you might know a little bit about me in that I've been in music education for many years. I've been playing professionally for many years as well. Most weekends you'll find me in a pub or a club somewhere playing a gig, which I totally love. And also that I've been a church musician since my late teens, and that's been a huge part of my life and continues to be, really. So when I got to speak to Stu G, I loved talking about all the stuff you'd usually hear on the Guitar Speak podcast, like parts, tones, gear, influences, all that kind of stuff. But it was also really cool as well to talk about the idea of corporate worship and the many ways you can express that and the many venues you can take that to as well. All right, let's jump straight in. My conversation with Stu G. Stu Garrard, welcome to the Guitar Speak podcast.
Hey, thanks, Matt. Thanks for having me. It's good to be with you.
Oh, man, it's our honour to have you on the show. I've been following you as a musician since the fairly early Delirious days, since King of Fools, pretty much, till now. So it's a thrill to meet you and have you on the show.
Thank you. Yeah, God, that's a long time ago now.
Yeah. There's been a lot of guitar notes played in that interim that we'll try and talk a bit about today. Now, you're in Nashville these days. How long have you been living there now?
Yeah, so we moved to Nashville in 2010. When I say we, that's my wife and my two daughters. Mm-hmm. So 2010, we moved over here. That was a year after Delirious finished.
Yep.
And I'd spent some time in the last year that Delirious was touring, 2008, 2009. I would kind of tag a few days on if we were in America, and I'd come to Nashville or LA or wherever and just kind of stay connected with people that I'd met in the industry. And it wasn't long before I got a few sessions and I got a publishing deal, and so it worked out for us to live here to save all the travel.
Yeah, sure. That's a pretty exciting shift after Delirious, and I'd love to talk about Delirious at some stage too, but you already had some connections and some opportunities in the States.
Yeah, whatever you do, it's kind of like about relationship, isn't it? So, over the years, you kind of meet people, whether they're record label folks or you make friends in other bands and meet songwriters and all that kind of stuff. And so, yeah, I'm really grateful that I met a few people and, we forged friendships and, it kind of led to living here.
That's very cool. Now, by the time you get to Nashville, you've already got a very well-formed guitar voice, but I guess the thing with Nashville, the story is if you shake a tree there, you'll get 10 guitar players falling out, and they're all really, really good. Has anything of Nashville rubbed off on you in your own playing?
Well, I think so. Firstly, you have to assimilate to the environment that you're in, and so like one simple kind of example of that was that I didn't know the Nashville number system
Okay, yeah.
in charts, before I moved here. And so that was like learning a different language in some ways, turn up for a session and have a chart that you can't really read and put in front of you. That kind of was in at the deep end,
Yeah.
So I learned on the go, as it were. And but I think that one thing it's taught me moving to Nashville, like the sort of almost 20 years that we were doing Delirious, and we were just doing our own thing. It was our own music,
Yeah.
and I was writing those songs and that music with Martin predominantly. And it's a very different kind of scenario than it is when you come somewhere and you become more of a sideman or more of a session player, where you have to do what the producer wants, So that I think it reminded me that, to always have the kind of posture of a student. You never stop learning, and that's been the case. So more recently, well, I mean, actually, for 10 years I've been playing with Michael W. Smith,
Yeah.
a Christian artist here in Nashville. So I play live with him, and so to be able to learn how to play he's got some big songs like Place in This World, Secret Ambition, and the incredible guitar player Dan Huff
Yes.
played those solos and played on those records. So to have to kind of learn those, to be able to do them every night, has, like, to be honest, it's kicked my butt, and but that's what I mean. Like, I don't know that I like the feeling of like being stretched and put under pressure, but I like the feeling of it, if you know what I mean. Like, I like the
Sure.
results of it. It's a bit like working out, No one wants to go out for a run in the morning, but or work out, but you feel the benefit of it later. And so, there are situations that I get in, whether that's in the studio or playing live, where perhaps it's a genre or a style that you haven't really mastered yet, and so it just pushes you to become a better player and a more rounded player. And so that's what I am very grateful for in terms of the Nashville scene here.
Excellent. What else can you tell me about working with Michael W. Smith? Because that was when you got to Nashville, obviously that was one of the big gigs that kept you in the States and helped cement you there.
Yeah. So I mean, for a start, he's been he's been making records since the early '80s, and he is like to work with him. I mean, it's an honor in all kinds of ways, like the fact that he's a legend for a start, but and become a good friend, one of the kindest people that I know. But he's just such an incredible musician. Obviously he's known for his songs and he sings those, but like when you hear him sit at the piano and play, it's quite amazing, like the depth of music that is in him, and it's so inspiring. So I would say that's one of the greatest things from work with Michael, is that the level of musicianship with him, what he hears, and perhaps you don't think that he can hear you when you make a mistake, whatever, but he knows for certain, and it's amazing. And a kind man and an incredible musician.
Wonderful. Now, Stu, on your website, the mast is Stu Garrard, musician, author, collaborator. And I'd like to talk about that word collaboration. That seems to be a big part of your career. I mean, you've talked about doing sessions, being a sideman, being part of the Delirious crew there. One particular project in recent years is the Beatitudes project, which was an album, but then there was a podcast and there was artworks and your book. How did that evolve in such a massive multimedia project?
I mean, for a start, the collaboration thing, just looking at Delirious, Delirious was a sum of five parts, for the five of us in the band. And beyond that, Tony, our manager, he was like a sixth member and, helped us with all the business stuff. But collaboration really has always been at the forefront of my mind. Like, I'm very aware that I'm better when I'm with other people. And and that seems to be in every area of my life, whether that's songwriting, or just in terms of being with family, whatever. I'm a better person when I'm working with other people. And so collaboration's always been a thing, especially in those Delirious years, like we were carrying one big vision of like making the best music we possibly could and playing the world and stuff like that. But it was the five of us that made it what it was, So over those years, being a Christian and having a certain kind of attraction to the Sermon on the Mount, I had always been really intrigued by the Beatitudes, which are these sayings at the beginning of the Sermon on the Mount, like these announcements of blessing. And they're kind of like words that you perhaps learn in Sunday school as a kid or whatever, and they can become very familiar. But when the band finished, so I thought that we would be, I thought that Delirious would make a Beatitudes project. I thought it would be a record, right? There's 8 themes in there, like nice size for 8 songs, and on a vinyl, But we never got around to it, and in the process of Delirious finishing and then being in this kind of transitional space of not knowing if my best work is behind me and not beginning something new, it's kind of it was kind of a depressing place for me, and but it was in that sort of space that I started to understand the Beatitudes as an announcement of where God is and what is blessing, and the invitation to kind of pour into that, because I think that we have the idea of blessing all wrong in terms of it's whether we get success or like perhaps we take on a project and we think, oh, God bless this, but actually the Beatitudes tell us what God is already blessing and invites us to push into that. So like the poor, those who grieve, those who mourn, those who are hungry and thirsty for justice. So and it goes on. I mean, this is about guitar, so I won't kind of bore everyone with the details. But in terms of collaboration, it was about music. So I asked. There's about 13 different songwriters on that record. People that I asked to write songs with me. People like Michael W., like Amy Grant, Martin Smith from Delirious, Hillsong United, Matt Maher, like all kinds of folks came and helped me write songs for it, and that kind of collaboration and that collaborative spirit kind of is all through the project. So I'm telling other people's stories on the film and in the book, and then we've put all the resources into an online e-course that people can go and see that all in one place online. So so that was very collaborative, and I'm still of the mind that I'm better when I'm doing stuff with other people, even if I come up with the idea.
Yeah. I love that. And I mean, the idea of putting those scriptures, expressing them through so many different ways is a very powerful way to do that.
Yeah, and I wanted to do it through like real current lens, a real 21st century lens. And so, with the theme of mercy, I met a woman who'd been on death row for 27 years, and in Peacemakers, like Blessed Are the Peacemakers, we based that whole chapter in the Holy Land in the middle of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. And, so I wanted to kind of put a lens on it that people could understand the context.
So when you talk about Delirious and that idea of collaboration, the 5 of you, it is a pretty extraordinary story how you're a band birthed out of a local ministry in the United Kingdom meeting. Was it once a month or something?
That's right. Yep. Yeah, it was a youth worship event called Cutting Edge, and it was started by the drummer Stu Smith and Tim, who was the keyboard player, his wife Becca. They were kind of youth leaders at a church, and they started this event. The idea was to create a worship night in a with using the music and the style that people were into at the time. So so that's where it was birthed, and I kind of came on the scene a year or so after they started, and we kind of all gelled together, and I remember that there were certain songs that people still sing in church, like I Could Sing You Love Forever and Did You Feel the Mountains Tremble and stuff like that. And when we when we were playing Did You Feel the Mountains Tremble, the essence of that was open up the doors and let the music play. So the idea of like not keeping what we have discovered and what we found and our praise, if you like, within the four walls of the church, but to take it out from those nights into our families and our workplaces and colleges and wherever we are. And we felt like that not to be if we were to do that as a band, then we would need to take our music out and put it on the high street and see if we could get it on the radio, and there's not a huge Christian music scene in terms of the business, or there wasn't at the time in the UK, and so we just kind of went on this mission to kind of write songs and take our music and get it on the radio, and so we ended up having 5 top 20s in the UK pop chart. We had a number 2 on the radio in Germany, and we you got to remember the context. Like, we were these guys that were playing in church, and we went on tour with Bon Jovi, and we played Glastonbury Festival and places like that across Europe, and then, all, at the same time, we were singing the same songs that we were doing at church events. And, the cutting edge thing kind of blew up, and we ended up doing these events on the beachfront. We lived in a seaside town called Littlehampton in West Sussex on the south coast, and there's this big green in front of the beach, and I think the last time that we did a beachfront event, we had 10,000 people there, and so something was going on, and we were kind of capitalizing on that, and we ended up going full time. We gave up our jobs and thought perhaps we could do music full time, and it was at that point that we called ourselves Delirious, and we made an album, King of Fools, and we released singles off that into the charts, and did little tours of the HMVs and Virgin megastores around the country, and it was amazing times, and our fan base kind of got us in the charts, and it was really amazing times, because if you cut us in half, we'd bleed worship. So that was the aim of what we were doing, was we were trying to, write songs that pointed people towards God,
So I saw you guys a bunch of times in Sydney, and it was always a really interesting mix of, I don't know if I'm speaking out of turn, but like big rock and roll show that could easily morph into worship. I don't even know if morph is the right word, but it didn't feel like a church service, but it felt like you could just start worshipping at any stage. I don't know if that even makes sense.
Yeah, no. So that was, that was what it was like. We tried not to talk about, looking at rock and roll and worship as two separate things. It was always, the idea was that it was always one big thing, and so that was. It wasn't even really ever talked about. It's just what it was. We weren't going to try and separate the sacred and the secular. And because everything is sacred.
Yes.
So that's what it was, and we used to like playing loud, and but it was really all for that experience of we wanted to create experiences for people to encounter something that was bigger than themselves, and bigger than us.
It's and as I say, what I did, it felt like a totally natural experience. I should add that as well. Like, I'm not saying it felt like you were consciously shifting gears. So, as you say, you were just presenting yourselves, and people were engaging at whatever level they were at, I guess. Which is cool.
I think, we didn't really know what we were doing. I think that was one of the authentic things about it. You know, in some ways we were quite naive to it. We just had a sense and a vision to just, take it as big as we could, and travel the world doing it.
This episode is brought to you by Fretboard Biology, the comprehensive online guitar course put together by Joe Elliott, ex-head of guitar at the Guitar Institute of Technology and the McNally Smith College of Music. I was one of the beta testers for the course and can say, as a music educator, I was really impressed by the logical sequence of learning. The course has also been endorsed by players such as Brett Garrard and Greg Koch. For more details, check out the links in our show notes. I remember being in a huge indoor stadium in Sydney, 20,000 people, all singing at the top of their lungs, like Majesty. And I had a little theory. I thought, you guys come from the land of football stadiums, and as a kid watching the football, or the soccer, as a lot of people call it in Australia and the States, I guess, who might be listening, and you'd hear these crowds singing on TV. I didn't know what that sound was for a long time, and it was the crowd singing. It seemed like you guys came from the land of stadium singing. It seemed like you guys were the right people to bring that, because that was part of your culture.
Yeah, there's a couple of things there. Firstly, like we were tapping into something that was happening not just with us, but with other folks from the UK. So there was, at the same time, I mean, I guess you just call it a wave, and we managed to catch it, but so did the guys at Soul Survivor, and so Matt Redman and Tim Hughes and those fellas. So when we all and just before us, there was people like Noel Richards and Graham Kendrick, who were kind of setting us up, or setting that up, and in fact, Noel Richards had that vision for the Champion of the World event at Wembley Stadium, to kind of, to your exact point, his thing was, we see every week, every year, these stadiums full of people kind of, praising man. What would it be like if we or praising the achievements of man, what would it be like if we filled a stadium and filled it with people who are singing the praise of God, And so, but every time I would go into a football stadium or into a cathedral, I would have the same feeling, like of like people going to these places and singing or seeking God, or whatever. And so I guess you're right, but I was very aware, that that we were just joining with, like, there's a bit in the Bible about there's a cloud of witnesses, saints and angels, like people that have gone before, and so there was very much a feeling of like we were joining with a crowd of people that had gone before, and so this sort of football stadium thing, and that sort of idea of cathedrals and big kind of churches that have been around for centuries, that kind of makes sense that feeling comes across, of joining with loads of voices. And I think the other thing that marked that time for us in the UK was this feeling of unity, of multi-denominational people coming together and like doing their things in one voice. That was very much a thing for us, and something that we were attached ourselves to.
Fantastic. Another I guess what part of what you brought to it, not all of it, but part of it were obviously the guitar parts and the sounds, and it seemed to be a pushing, a stretching of perhaps some of the sounds that people were playing in their churches or in worship services. And that was obviously a big deal for you guys, the sonic footprint. Now, Stu, you seem as equally happy creating really trippy and ambient stuff as you do just rocking out massive Les Paul Marshall tones.
Yeah.
Who influenced you as a guitar player to have such a diverse spectrum of sounds and approaches going on?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I was lucky in some ways to have been born in the 60s, you know, and I remember seeing the Stones and the Beatles on Top of the Pops, and then you know, as a kid, and jumping up and down on my bed with a tennis racket, pretending it was a guitar, you know.
Yeah.
But it was really, I've got so many influences. You know, I love music. Guitar is my first love. And so it wasn't until I was 16, though, that I came across the Queen Live Killers record in a record shop and put the headphones on and listened to it. And that was a hit a brick wall moment. You know, that was a you know, turn the other way moment. I totally wanted to be Brian May at that point. So Brian May was a huge influence on me and my playing. And then at the same time, you know, there was bands like Led Zeppelin and Dave Gilmour with Pink Floyd, those in particular, and then Rush with Alex Lifeson was a huge influence on my playing too. And you know, so like with Alex Lifeson, you know, it starts to get a little bit more kind of like in the later years, like more of the ambient stuff coming in. And then you know, but at the same time, in the late 70s, early 80s, there was that whole new wave movement. So there was bands like The Clash and like XTC and like The Police, you know, were a huge influence as well. Andy Summers, I think that, you know, so you got choruses, flanges and delays going on at that point. And then Edge, you know, I can't speak too much about, you know, the Edge and what an influence he's been over the years, and you know his work with Brian Eno in particular on the albums that Daniel Lanois and Brian Eno have produced.
Yeah.
You know, that gets very kind of ambient and lush. So it's all those influences start coming in. I'm starting to think like, oh, you know, you can do that on guitar. That's amazing. And then the next kind of, you know, brick wall moment for me, U-turn moment, was when I heard the Bends for the first time, the Radiohead album, The Bends.
Yeah.
And hearing Johnny Greenwood, and then, you know, hearing what they did with OK Computer. And in fact, OK Computer came out, and we were doing a HMV tour, so I remember picking that up on the day of release and playing it in the van with everyone and just being blown away. And that really influenced the direction of our Mesomorphics album. And some of the chord changes and the sounds that came on that. So, you know, a real host of influences, honestly, over the years. But the names that I've mentioned are some of the main ones.
Sure, yeah, it's a pretty exciting time in music, isn't it? That whole era, far out. That's amazing. Yeah. When you mention Mesomorphos and Glow, that's that's a time where the production, got bigger and broader and more far-reaching. One of my favourite moments on, I reckon, maybe any Delirious guitar moment, but off that era is the "Hang On to You" guitar solo. And in the studio version, anyway, it sounds like you're starting off on an octave fuzz, and then halfway through, it just sounds like the guitar explodes, like on purpose. The tone just kind of disintegrates. It's so euphoric, and then it comes back just at the end. It's
wow. Yes, I'd need to listen to that again to remember that part. But I know that it was octave fuzz, and it was ZVEX Octane pedal. That so I had I'd been on a Smashing Pumpkins discovery journey. And was really into their tones, and and Billy Corgan's playing, actually, you know, is really phenomenal, and his use of riffs and sounds and things, and so I got into through one of the producers that we were using, Chuck Zwicky, he was from Minneapolis, and so are Zvex pedals, and so he brought a few down and introduced me to like the Woolly Mammoth and the Fuzz Factory and the Fuzz Probe and the Octane and stuff like that. So they became staples on the for a while. I still have I still have all those pedals, and I still have fuzz pedals on my board now.
Yeah. In terms of the 90s, what a time to be a guitar player in terms of pedals. That's super cool.
That's right.
Yeah, lots of great fuzz tones on those records from you as well.
Thank you.
When you're crafting tones, do the tones inspire the parts or vice versa? So if I think of a song like Bliss, the big riff, that's a really distinct kind of guitar voice there.
Yeah, like on the intro.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in Delirious, a lot of times, I'd be experimenting with sound, and then that sound would inspire the song. It doesn't happen like that so much in my world right now, because I'm often being sent tracks to play on, so there's already an established kind of song. So the song happens before the parts. So I'm just thinking about parts at that point, and then the tone follows that. But in the Delirious years, oftentimes I'd discover a certain sound, and I remember on that one in particular, I had a Digitech Talker pedal, which is a huge kind of pyramid shaped like pedal that takes a microphone and you can it kind of copies the sound of a talk box, and it has a couple of other settings on it that does it automatically, and so I was messing around with that and came up with that riff, and that sound on the Bliss intro was that Talker pedal, and my Les Paul Gold Top, and probably my tremor verb, Mesa tremor verb.
Very cool. That is massive. It is larger than life, that tone.
Yeah.
And so many of them. Like there's EBO all over these tracks. There's slide. There's some electric 12
So another
string.
thing, like another person that I was influenced by a lot was Phil Kagi, who's a guitar player here in Nashville, and he became a good friend, and so that he had several albums where the EBO featured, and I was like, I wonder what that is, so I investigated that, and I got an EBO with a cassette that kind of taught you how to use it.
Yeah, it came with a cassette, that's right, and a little badge.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and so I experimented with that, and found how to kind of roll the treble off and kind of make it sound like a flute or like a cello and what have you. And so the EBO became a big part of what we did in Delirious with songs like Obsession, and Find Me in the River and stuff like that.
Yeah, super inspiring. I got an EBO not long after that, I reckon. There was Robert Fripp and there was you. That's who I was listening to.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Not that Fripp used an EBO, but he was into the sustainer thing, which is similar but different.
Yeah. Yeah, gosh, I mean, that's an honour to be mentioned in the same breath as Robert Fripp, that's for sure.
Oh, totally, Stu. You've inspired, I think, so many guitar players in searching for tone and just your playing, your parts, definitely. So, 100%.
That's amazing. Thank you.
Do you have a favourite EBO guitar? Because certain guitars respond differently to EBO. What was your go-to?
Yeah, my go-to in the studio was my Telly, I think, my blue Mexican Telly that I used to have. But like you say, you can use it on any guitar. They just have a different point where they start to work.
Sure.
So it's kind of a little bit different on a humbucker guitar than it is to a single coil. But it works on any guitar. The Telly was my go-to. Nowadays, I use a Strat. I have a Strat that is my go-to guitar for EBO. But yeah, it's just because it's sitting there, and that's what I pick up first.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, when you moved to Nashville, did you eventually bring all your guitars over, or did you start again? What happened in terms of all your stuff? Because you must have amassed a whole heap of gear.
Yeah, I had a bunch of gear, and I didn't want to lose some of that stuff, because it holds sentimental value as much as anything. Some of the guitars that I used on Delirious, like my Les Pauls and my 135
Yeah.
and my Tele, so I definitely didn't want to lose them. So yeah, I shipped them over, and also my amps, shipped them over as well, and yeah, they arrived pretty much unscathed, and that's what I'm using nowadays.
Yeah, cool. What are your main amps?
So back in the day, there when Delirious was finishing, I was using a Park. There was a 70s Park combo. That was my favorite amp, and then I was using a JMP 50 from 1973 Marshall with a forward 12 cabinet. So I brought them over. I brought my Mesa Tremor Verb over.
Mm-hmm.
And what else? I had a 62 AC30 that I brought over, and a small little amp, which is like a little secret weapon for me, which is a WEM Westminster. It's a 15-watt amp from the early 80s, which is a great little amp. So that's all here. And then since I've been here, I've amassed a few more things, and one of my favorite things of the last year has been this Benson amp that I've got. It's called a Benson Monarch with reverb. It's like an 18-watt 1x12 combo that just sounds amazing. And I've worked with Delana at Third Power Amps, and so live I use a Third Power amp rig, and we made an amp called the Majestic 40, which is a 40-watt head that was kind of inspired by my Park. And so yeah, I use that on the road along with a more AC30 voiced amp. So I've always felt like a Vox and Marshall person.
Yeah.
And so live, that's kind of like what my voice is. And over the years, I got into using two amps because I like the blend of the tones, and then kind of by accident, you discover that if you use a stereo delay or something, it widens it a bit. So if people see me with two amps and what have you, they immediately think I'm sort of stereo, and it is if I put a stereo effect on it, but generally it's kind of just that I like the blend.
Right, so it's more of a tonal thing rather than running wet dry or dual wet or something.
And the other thing, that's right. And the other thing was that Martin played a bit of guitar, but he was also the front man and lead singer, so it was a bit more of a U2 situation where my guitar was one of the main kind of sounds of the band, and so it needed to be big. It needed to be sort of front and center. So that's another reason why why we kind of ended up with the two amp thing.
Yeah, cool. Man, and a Vox and a Marshall, you can't go wrong. Put those together. That's a really nice mix of things going on there.
Yeah. And over the years, you turn up at some festival and they don't have a Vox and a Marshall, and you can make anything work. I think you don't have to have your gear to sound like you.
Uh-huh.
And when I've tried someone else's rig, for instance, I still sound like me. And there's a guitarist here called Michael Pope, and he comes over the studio every now and then, and I'm always blown away when he plays through my rig or through an amp in the studio, whatever, and I'm like, oh man, I wish I sounded like that. Yeah. One thing I've learnt though through years of being in studios and making records and what have you is that the cabinet whether that's in a combo or whatever. I mean, it's such a huge part of the sound. We kind of focus on the amps a lot, you know,
Yeah.
and but you know, I was talking with a guitarist called Jerry McPherson, who's an amazing guitar
Oh,
player
yeah.
and one of the kind of go-to guys in Nashville.
Actually,
And,
just to jump in, the first time I ever saw him play was with Michael W. Smith, because he toured with
Right.
him for
Yeah.
some time. Yeah.
yeah, no,
Anyway,
that's right.
little circle there.
And yeah, we were both like talking about. I just said to him, you know, I think that the cabinet like plays as much of a part of the sound of an amp than the amp does as well, you know. And he's like 100%, like, and he would go as far as to say it's like at least 2/3 of the sound is the
Wow.
cabinet,
Okay.
you know, and
Yeah.
the
Right.
speaker, you know. So, but yeah, so just I love talking about all the gear stuff, you know, and it's kind of real passion. It's good to be able to nerd out about it.
Yeah, good times. Now you've also delved into the digital world as well. I know
Yep.
you've done some work with Kemper. What
Yep.
place does that have in your work?
Yeah, no, I mean, like, it was an opportunity to, you know, I don't think it's a conversation about like what is better and what isn't. That's up to the player, you know, and how things make you feel. It's you know, the Kemper stuff and the Helix and Quad Cortex and fractal stuff, you know, they're tools to be used, and there's a huge amount of players that are using them. And so for me it was about, well, I don't want to get left behind in the conversation. And then secondly, you know, I wanted to with the Kemper in particular at the time was one of the only bits of kit that you could actually profile your amp sound on. And so I thought, well, I want to like you know, dive into this, and you know, perhaps sometimes that's going to help when I've got to do a part at like midnight and I don't want to wake the house up, you know.
Yeah, sure.
And but also as a record of like tones over the years. And so yeah, I work with a company called Tone Junkie TV, HW over there, and yeah, we've pretty much profiled every one of my amps, and yeah, so I kind of create some presets, and so the way I use it in my career as a guitar player is, say for instance that we are going to do a Christmas show with Michael W, and we're using a symphony orchestra. You know, my having my, you know, 4x12 and part combo on stage is not going to work.
Yeah,
you know,
sure.
in terms of all the other acoustic instruments on
Yeah.
stage. And so I would rather use my Kemper in that situation than I would using SGI boxes and running my amps into an isolation room, you know, 50 feet off the back of the stage or something.
Okay.
You know, at that point when you're not feeling the amps, they sound exactly the same to me.
Yes.
Plus you're in control of your tone, because you're hearing your sound, your amp through your pre's and your microphones.
Yeah.
You know, it's different to standing in front of an amplifier, but it's so consistent and always the same. And so that's when I use it, when the environment demands that I can't make any noise. Then I'll take my Kemper rack and not even think twice about it.
Sure.
You know? Yeah. Or if we have to fly to somewhere, and perhaps it might be a bit sketchy as to the quality of backline that production can provide. You know, I'll take my my Kemper rig, and the front of house loves it.
Oh, yeah.
The audience don't. You know, they don't know any different.
Yeah, cool.
So,
It's a great
yeah.
solution. Stuart,
Yeah,
it's
it is
been
really good.
it's been amazing talking to you. Thank you so much. It's been like I said,
yeah.
to have followed your work and then to dive into it is a great thrill, and I know our listeners will really enjoy the conversation too. Can we finish with one more question?
Yes.
What are some things worship musicians should know about?
That nothing comes without hard work and dedication. I think, you know, I think that oftentimes when we're talking to church musicians and worship musicians, people on worship teams, there's conversations around gift and around character, and I think that we should be working as hard on every area of what we do, and so to practice and be the best player and learn everything you can about your instrument, at the same time as you're kind of learning about discipleship and character and helping you in your life, but as a musician, I'm only as good as my experience lets me be. I can't I don't just want to sit down and robotically learn someone's parts on a song. I want to understand why it works.
Mm-hmm.
What happens when your mind goes blank and you can't remember something is like you got to have something in your well, to rely on and understand why certain notes work together with different chords, and so that's why to this day I still practice my major scale in every position on the neck, in every chord base, and just to stay as familiar as I can with where I am on the fretboard.
Yeah, awesome. That's a good mix of the two, the tools and the heart of it. So thank you for sharing that. And Stu, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Oh, it's great, Mike. Great chatting with you, and I hope it's been helpful for everyone.
I reckon it has.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Great. Well, let me know if you want to chat again.
All right, there you go. Stu G on the Guitar Speak podcast. I might take him up on that. I might let him know if we can chat again sometime. I love that conversation, and amazing musician, really full-on guitar guy, sonic experimenter, and a worshipper on his instrument, which I love. All right, hey, coming up on the Guitar Speak podcast, of course, our midweek Iconic Albums series continues, which is going great. Last week we looked at U2's Achtung Baby. This week we are looking at Toto 4 and the amazing work of Steve Lukather. So look out for that one. The best thing for the podcast is just to subscribe on Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you pod. And then you'll get these episodes delivered for free in your podcatcher thing. Hey, if you're enjoying the conversations, the interviews, and the iconic albums, why not share them through your social media networks or wherever? That really helps us get the word out. My thanks also to Joe Elliott and the Fretboard Biology team for sponsoring today's episode. Please check out the links in the show notes. All right, my name's Matt Wakeling. You've been listening to the Guitar Speak podcast. And I got to speak to Michael Schenker once, and he told me,
keep rocking, keep on rocking.
Keep on rocking indeed. All right, catch you next time. Bye now.